Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about the Big Ten and some of the different Cinderellas in that conference. I went into Nebraska and Wisconsin myself, but definitely some other teams to watch out there. Iowa, USC, some other teams that are definitely very, very interesting. But let's get into a Top 10 Tuesday. And today we're going to do something a little bit different, kind of an interesting list. I got my biggest domino players in the country, and that might be a little bit confusing. Essentially, what I mean is if these players hit, if these players play to their top potential, a lot of stuff happens around them. Not just, their team succeeding, but possibly winning the conference, possibly going to the playoff, possibly, saving their head coach, doing a lot of different things that can affect the entire college football landscape. So I wanted to break down these guys. Definitely a very interesting list to put together, but let's start with one of the guys that was one of the biggest transfers of this past class, and definitely someone that will have plenty to say about the ACC this upcoming year. Well, frankly, I'm starting at the wrong side. I shouldn't be starting at number 1. I'm going to start at number 10, and we're going to start with one of the biggest players from a year ago, Jalen Milroe. I think this is a very fascinating guy. He holds a ton of weight on his shoulders. When you talk about the amount of doubters that are coming into this season around Bama and Kalen DeBoer in this new era after Saban, Jalen Milroe is likely going to be the guy that decides a lot of it. He's going to be the guy that, they point to when they say this team was a failure or this team was a success. He's going to be the reason, one way or the other. So he has a ton on his shoulders this upcoming year. I think if he's able to be consistent in the mid-range passing game and he's able to, make some plays with his legs and, be who he is, he's going to make it really hard on some defenses. And let's just say for a second that Alabama makes a run, wins the SEC again, and, goes to the playoff. The conversation is no longer, what is Alabama after Nick Saban, is how is Alabama still doing this? And are they around just forever, for eternity at this point? So it's a remarkable amount of pressure that he has on his shoulders, but if he hits, then a lot of things happen for that program and for college football overall. But let's move on, stay in the SEC here for a second. Let's talk about Nico Iamaleava. I think when you talk about this Tennessee team, it's been a very long time since they've been national title contenders. Now, 2022 was a very fascinating year, and definitely a year that they would tell you if Hendon Hooker was healthy, they were winning the national title. I'm not as big on that as some other people, but I do think if they were able to repeat 2022 with quarterback health this time around, this is a very interesting team, and it would totally change the way that the Big Ten, or the SEC looks going forward, where it's no longer talking about Alabama or even talking about maybe Texas going into the future of the SEC. It's Tennessee right up there with Georgia and right up there maybe with Texas at the end of the day. But there's definitely a ton on this kid's shoulders, and if he hits, this team becomes, turns from a team that some high-level SEC teams aren't too worried about to a team that is going to compete for national titles and do things that they've been waiting quite some time in Knoxville for them to do. But let's move on to Cade Klubnik. This one has more to do with the outside world than pretty much any of the others. Clemson is under as much pressure as you could possibly imagine. There is so many things going into this year where Clemson didn't go into the portal. They didn't do certain things that people have continually told them they have to do. If Cade Klubnik plays well, they're going to be a really good team. And they're going to be a team that, bucks all those stereotypes and makes everyone know that we are doing it the right way. And the way that we do it is the winning way and that type of thing. So if Cade Klubnik can take a next step, if Garrett Riley and him can be in lockstep moving forward, I think this is going to be a really good Clemson team. It could be another elite Clemson team that makes the playoff and maybe makes a run in the national title. And then we're going to have a really different conversation about Clemson than we're having right now. So that'll be a fascinating player to watch. If he can make things happen for that Clemson offense, it could be a really interesting conversation a year from now. I'll just put it that way. And then I got Cam Rising at 7. I think when you look at the Big 12 right now, even if you take away the quarterback, Utah is the best team. It feels like bar none, that's no question. If you add a healthy Cam Rising that can really play some football, they're going to be the runaway team in this conference. I'll be totally honest. I like Kansas State. I think there's some teams right there that could give them a run for their money. But if Cam Rising is playing his football, I see them winning the conference, and I see them maybe even going undefeated on the road to doing that. So I think they're going to be a really good team. I think when I look at the Big 12 going forward, there are a couple of teams that I'm circling that could be the dominating forces in this conference. But a lot of it comes down to this year. Whoever wins this year is going to be in the driver's seat for that position, and I think Cam Rising will have plenty to say about what happens with Utah going forward. So very fascinating team, very fascinating person for this upcoming season. Definitely someone that can affect the entirety of the Big 12 and the way that people see Utah within the Big 12 going forward. But also, Avery Johnson is right above him. I think this kid can do some things that are totally unheard of. I think he's something I kind of call a lightning rod player. I think anytime he steps on the field, he ignites his team. He ignites the game. He ignites an entire season when he steps on the field because he's that electric. He can do things that not a lot of people in this country can do. Him and Dylan Edwards is going to be one of the best duos, one of the most interesting duos in the entire country. And if they, make a playoff run, win the Big 12, do some things that they definitely want to do this upcoming season, it could be a TCU type or Washington type run where you just make a couple of those plays that other people can't make, and Avery Johnson's going to be a huge reason for that. So I think he's a fascinating player. He's one of those guys that I think when you look at Kansas State, if you take him out of the equation, they're likely not necessarily a playoff team. You add him to the equation, I think they could make a run of the championship. So there's a ton to like about this team. Definitely a team that absolutely can make a run, but Avery Johnson's going to be the reason if they absolutely do. So that'll be really interesting to watch. But let's move into the top 5 here. And let's start with Alex Orji. I think this guy has a ton on his shoulders, a ton going into the season for Michigan where you lost so many people. You lost Jim Harbaugh. You lost, I think, 18 guys to the NFL. So many guys walked out of that program, and the one that everyone's focusing on, obviously, is J.J. McCarthy. If Alex Orji can somehow run this offense as efficiently or at least towards the same level that J.J. McCarthy ran it, this team is going to be dangerous. They're going to have an ability to, do some things in the run game that they haven't done in the past with Alex Orji and Donovan Edwards and Khalil Mullings. They're going to have the ability to play really good defense. There's no two ways about that. It's going to be a really dominating defense, and if Alex Orji hits and if Michigan goes to the playoff and they beat Ohio State for a 4th year in a row and they do some of the things that most people are assuming they just won't do again, what conversation are we having around Michigan? Are they the team that, are they the team that moves into the upper echelon of the sport? Are they with Georgia? Are they with, Bama and maybe Texas and some of the, if they beat Texas, there's a different conversation. So this is a very fascinating player, definitely one that adds a different dynamic to this offense. So definitely could be a big time player for them and could turn college football on its head, if I'm being totally honest. And then I have Jackson Dart at 4. I think you look at this Ole Miss team, everyone's watching them. There's so much going into this season. There's tons of portal guys, tons of guys that absolutely are going to have huge effects. And I think Jackson Dart, if he takes that next step forward, this team is going to be incredible. He's going to have a Heisman-level season. They're going to be able to win pretty much every game that they play, win the SEC, go to the playoff, do all of the things that they want to do. But it all falls on this kid's shoulders. And if he is able to pull all this off, if he's able to take that step forward and maybe have a Heisman-level season, Ole Miss is going to be a player in the SEC for quite some time. Lane Kiffin just needs that, rocket booster. He just needs the thing that kickstarts him into making Ole Miss not only a player in the 9-10 win category, but competing for SEC titles. But you need that igniter switch, and Jackson Dart is absolutely that guy that can make that happen this upcoming year. So a fascinating player. But now, Drew Aller at 3, I think, is a very obvious one. When you talk about what Penn State can be, it all comes down to this kid. Can he take that step forward? We talked about it yesterday. I frankly think he will take a step forward. It depends how big that is. That'll depend how far they can go in this upcoming year. But I think he has tons of talent. I think he can do incredible things at the quarterback position. And he brings something to Penn State that they haven't had in a long time, which is elite quarterback talent. And the players around him are a little bit of a worry, but I think they're going to have a great run game. I think they're going to be successful. I think they're going to have a good pass blocking. So give this kid time, and he's going to cook. I almost promise you that. And then him and Andy Kotelnicki getting on the same page is going to be huge for this team. But if all of that happens, if Drew Aller takes a leap forward, this is a team that can win the conference and, make Ohio State and Michigan fans very mad in the process and kind of turn this conference on its head where it feels like everyone's circling either Ohio State or Oregon to win this conference and kind of forgetting that Penn State has a ton of really good things in place. But if Drew Aller hits and he hits the way that I'm personally expecting him to hit, they're going to win this conference, and they're going to do some things that people just don't expect them to do. Now, all of that is rendered mute if this next guy, Will Howard, hits, because the reality is he might be the single most important player in the country this upcoming year. If he hits and plays really good football this upcoming year, if it plays A-plus football, the 2022 Will Howard that led Kansas State to a Big 12 title, it's over. Ohio State is your national champion, period. I feel very confident in that. This team is incredibly talented, incredibly deep, has so many guys on defense. The wide receiver group is a wide receiver group at Ohio State. It's going to be absolutely elite. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson right next to him. It's just ridiculous what this team can do. And this O-line's got to be a little bit better. It likely will be. Chip Kelly coming in is huge for him. My point in all of this, Will Howard could ruin college football in 2024. He could totally bury the rest of the entire sport because of how good this team is. And now it won't necessarily matter too much until that national championship game where maybe they face off against a Georgia who might be doing the exact same thing in the SEC. But Will Howard could totally bury everyone else in this conference, everyone else maybe in the sport, if he can play good football, because everything else on this team is outright elite. It's insane how good this team is, but if you just flip that last switch that is Will Howard in that quarterback position, things get really interesting. But number one on my list, and frankly, I might have flipped these two, Will Howard and this next guy, but Cam Ward, I have at number one. I might have had him at number two if I were to do it right now, if I'll be totally honest, but this guy is very fascinating. The Miami Hurricanes have been dormant for a little bit of time here. It hasn't necessarily been too long since they've been at the national and the forefront of the national conversation. And I promise you, Cam Ward might just get him there. He is someone that absolutely can play really high level football, and if he is who Hurricane fans want him to be and who they think he is, they can win a title. There's no doubt in my mind. He has plenty to work with on the outside with Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, Houston transfer Sam Brown coming in at wide receiver, Elijah Lofton's a standout freshman tight end, so he has plenty to work with. This team can be outright scary, and I promise, if Miami comes back to the forefront of this sport, we're having a very interesting conversation, because Mario Cristobal, with a lot of backing, with a lot of, that type of talent behind him, and this igniter season that we were talking about with Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, things would get really interesting down in South Florida. And I think Cam Ward has a super high ceiling, maybe even higher than some people might think. And if he hits, Miami is all the way back, and they can, compete for national titles and do some of the things that I think some people in the ACC and beyond are a little bit scared for Miami to do. I'll be totally honest with you. So it's going to be fascinating to watch these teams unfold, these players unfold, because they have a lot of power in their hands. If they play really good football, a lot of things can go right for them. If they play really bad football, a lot of things are going to happen in the wrong direction. So other guys, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, Dylan Gabriel, DJ, and Kyron Drones, all are going to have big-time effects on the season. But it was definitely those 10 players I felt like kind of separated themselves from the pack, at least in my opinion. Definitely let me know if you have any players that I missed on this list, but that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have incredible people doing awesome work across every single sport you could think of. So no worries, we have you totally covered over here at GSMC Sports. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you tomorrow.